growing chilies indoors versus outdoors. Today we're going to be taking a look at the two plants that I've been running a small experiment with since earlier in the year and see the comparison between the two. Let's start off with the outdoor Poblano. Now the plant's still alive, so that's one good thing. There's a couple other things to point out. I did get quite a few comments on the first video that I did where I actually started this experiment. People saying that I shouldn't be planting squashes, or in this case we've got some courgettes. Well, they're not courgettes anymore, they've turned into marrows because they're huge. I shouldn't plant them so close to the plant because that's not fair, they're going to be taking out the nutrients. So two things about that. Firstly, this is typically how a lot of people will be growing their plants. They'll be mixing them up in a small vegetable bed similar to this. We have some tomatoes over here, we have my poblano here, we have some squashes, some courgettes, some marrows. I even have on this side some of my artichokes. And yeah, it's not ideal. If you are growing for yield, then yeah, you want to keep this on its own. You want to give it as much space as possible. The second thing to point out is I've been feeding this thing very well. Down the bottom there, I have been putting not only fertilizer that I've been using indoors, but I've also been using some other manure that I've been top dressing with. And the plant's doing okay. It's not too bad. The biggest restriction here is not nutrients. It's not about all that. What it is about the warmth. Chili plants really like to have warm roots, and that's going to play a major factor in the size of the plant and the health of the plant. Now, this has actually done a lot better than I expected it would do, and honestly, if I'd started it earlier in the year, this probably would be a little bit bigger and you probably would have some more fruit on it. But at the same time, so would the one that's inside the greenhouse that we're going to take a look at in just a little while. Obviously, with the move that we've just made, had a bit of a delay in actually getting my plants out here as well as potted up properly inside the greenhouse, and that's had an impact in the size of my plants and the yields that I'll get at the end of the year. So I will redo this experiment again next year. I think we're going to see similar results, at least in terms of, you know, this is not going to be as big, not as abundant as the ones inside the greenhouse, but I'll do a few experiments, not just one plant like I did this year. But all in all, actually, it didn't do too badly. These are quite dense, and you know, that I think is because they grow a little slower than the ones that inside the greenhouse. The ones in the greenhouse probably aren't as heavy as a similar sized one that I got over here. And I'll test that again later in the year when we do our final episode on this kind of experiment. Now, yes, there are other factors that play into this. A big one is the amount of water that these get. Chili plants, again, like to have dry roots in between watering. Now, we've been pretty fortunate with the weather. Fortunate in one way in that we haven't had a ton of rain in the last month or two. But at the same time, as you can see today, it's gray, it's overcast. It's been like this for about 3 weeks now. We've had maybe 1 or 2 days of sunshine, and that really has an impact on the plants, but it's the same impact that the plants inside the greenhouse will have in terms of sunshine. But the amount of water that this gets, there was a week or two where we just had rain constantly. That is really going to set your plants back quite a lot. So there are some other factors, and we will do a more robust experiment next year as I have more time and a bit more space and a bit more organized. So keep an eye out for that. Make sure that you are subscribed so that you can see what I get up to in terms of those experiments. But there's some interesting ones coming along. I just really wanted to do this from a small capacity just to see what my new growing area is going to be like. And yeah, I might actually plant out, not just for the experiment, but just for myself, some extra space for my chili plants, plant out a few more, try some different varieties, and we'll get them out here inside some of the raised beds. I think it's time to go have a look and see how the plant that's inside the greenhouse is doing, and we'll do a little bit of a comparison and you can see the difference. Here we can see my Poblano plant. Now straight away, of course, the chilies are bigger. We can see maybe about 25 to 50% bigger. And this is not a full indication of what this plant looked like. You can see I've trimmed off quite a bit of the foliage on here. Some of it also just broke off, which is again why I have supports on here. It was just getting so heavy and the branches were growing too quickly. We can see they're just stretching and stretching. Part of that is because of the lack of sunlight. We can see how tall this single branch has got, but the more sunlight it had, it would have been a bit more dense and a bit more low down. But we can also see just in that small pot, that's I think it's 10 liter, maybe a 12 liter pot. And that's perfectly fine. I have been feeding it, of course, but at the same time that I feed this, I am feeding my other plant outside. Now, I am growing these for my competition. So if you haven't yet entered, I am doing a Poblano competition, who can grow the biggest. And there's some pretty cool prizes. I'll leave a link down below, and I'll see if I can link it up above as well. It's looking good. This plant is healthy, and it definitely is bigger than the one that's outdoors. But like I said before, these peppers actually aren't as dense as the ones outside. So even though this might be 25 to 50% larger than the ones outside, I don't think they're going to be necessarily 25 to 50% heavier than the ones outside. Like I said before, I will be doing this experiment again next year. I'll be changing up some of the variables. I'll be including some other varieties of plants, and I'll be doing it in a more optimal manner. This year has been a little bit of a write-off in terms of a few things that have been out of my control, but next year, definitely be able to plan this a lot better. I'd be interested to see what your opinions are as to what I should include in the experiment next year. So certain conditions maybe you want me to change, varieties that you'd like me to test this with. So let me know in the comments below. Interested to see what you think. I already have some ideas of what varieties I want to use and some other conditions in that, but you might have an idea for me that I haven't even thought of. So really looking forward to reading those. The Poblano competition, make sure that you have signed up for it if you have ones that are bigger than this, and I'm sure many of you do. I've seen a lot of posts up on the Facebook group. Some of you guys have some monsters, and I've already had some submissions in my entries on my website for peppers that have been pretty large. But if you've got one that can compete, it doesn't even have to be a Poblano, to be honest. If you got something that's really heavy, send that in as well. I'll be kind of running two parts to this competition. One is the largest Poblano, of course, but then there'll be a second prize. If you've got a monster chili as well, then yeah, make sure that you submit it. I will leave a link down below to how to submit those peppers for the competition to make sure that's fair for everyone. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Until then, stay spicy.